There was only one head coaching change within the Big Ten Conference this offseason. Ryan Walters getting the big old boot out of West Lafayette, and Barry Odom becoming the new head coach of the Purdue Boilermakers. But although there wasn't a lot of change in terms of who was head coach where, there's a good amount of change from my 2024 Big Ten head coach power rankings to this upcoming 2025 Big Ten head coach power rankings. You know, after Ohio State won the national championship through the winter, before they started spring practice, everybody was feeling that five-star quarterback Julian Sayin would really take the reins this year as the quarterback of the Buckeyes. But following some spring scrimmages, Lincoln Kienholz said it's going to take more than just a couple of stars to kick me out of the starting quarterback role for the Buckeyes. USC has all of the resources to be a top program in college football. But can the Trojans be the Trojans of old in the new landscape of college football in the Big Ten? We're going to tackle it all here on Big Nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
You know, it's fun to look back at how I ranked teams, how I ranked head coaches prior to the 2024 season. Well, maybe it's not as fun when you kind of look at how high I ranked some of those teams, like where I ranked some of these head coaches. Like I had Curt Cignetti as the number 16 head coach in the Big Ten prior to the 2024 season. In my defense, he had not coached at the Power 4 level. He had not been a head coach in the Big Ten Conference. He'd done it at a much lower level. Wait, what did he do? He came into the Big Ten year one, went 11-1, and qualified for the college football playoff. I had Lincoln Riley as the number 2 head coach in the Big Ten Conference. Yeah, that'll change here flowing into these 2025 rankings. But that's what the fun of this is to kind of put yourself out there, put your opinion out there, and then see how wrong you are when you look at these things the next spring or the next summer. And that's exactly what we are going to do here today. 2025 Big Ten head coach power rankings. Here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to throw up 6 coaches at a time, and then we're going to look at the whole darn thing when all is said and done. We want to start at the bottom, and we are going to work our way to the top. Here are coaches 13 through 18, and let's start at the bottom. Now, I put Barry Odom at 17, ahead of Deshaun Foster at number 18, because Barry's just got more experience as a head coach. You look at what he was able to do these last couple of years at UNLV, some of the best seasons that they've ever had down there in Vegas in that Runnin' Rebels football program. I think that deserves some credit. And Barry Odom was a head coach over there at Missouri. He had a couple of bowl appearances as the head coach of the Tigers over there in the SEC. I really like Barry Odom. Whatever they define success as at Purdue going forward, I think Barry certainly can get them there. You look at Deshaun Foster. Like, he had one season as a head coach, and they went 5-7. They failed to make a bowl game. Before this, all Deshaun was a position coach. So you can maybe understand why he's still, like, I don't love putting Foster at 18 because I really like what he did. UCLA continued to fight and fight and fight, and I think Deshaun Foster deserves a lot of credit because there was a stretch in the middle of the season that was very, very difficult for him, but he kept these guys focused. You know, that big Friday night win against Iowa I thought was really big for UCLA this season, but I've got him at number 18, Barry Odom at number 17, and then we work our way up to Mike Locksley at number 16. I think he was at number 11 in my 2024 head coach power rankings, and he's getting towards the bottom here because what is Mike Locksley outside of Taulia Tagovailoa? We saw this program take a pretty drastic step down this past season in the first Mike Locksley season of no Taulia Tagovailoa over there at quarterback. Like, One game that really stuck out to me for locks this past year was just getting absolutely hammered on a Friday night against the Northwestern Wildcats. If you lose to Northwestern 23-20, hey, so be it. But not showing up against that caliber of football team is inexcusable. He's kind of very, it's a little bit confusing to try to evaluate him right now because Maryland is doing crazy stuff on the recruiting trail. Like they could pull in 2 like top 5 overall players in this upcoming 2026 recruiting class, but will Mike Locksley be around to be able to develop those guys or see those guys step foot onto campus at the University of Maryland? That's something that I think needs to be talked about. This thing might have peaked at an 8-win season. I got Locksley sitting there at number 16. I've got David Braun at 15. Remember, this is a Big Ten Coach of the Year we're talking about, and Northwestern is a very difficult place. I've said this before. Northwestern is a very difficult place to sustain success. It is near impossible to win 7 games every year, to win 8 games every year. When we look at Pat Fitzgerald, okay, he would win 7, 8, 9 games. He would drop down to 3 or 4. He'd win 8 games. He'd drop down to a 4-win season. Every other year, it seemed that Pat Fitzgerald and Northwestern would really pop up and have a really good season. And I think that's what we're really forming into, certainly with David Braun. He had a really good year a couple of years ago. That first year, the interim tag fell off. He became the permanent head coach. Last year took a little bit of a step down. The quarterback just didn't work out, whether it was Jack Lausch, whether it was Mike Wright. They're hoping that Preston Stone this year is going to be able to be better, but I've got David Braun sitting there at number 15. This is a big year to really determine which way that he's going to go with that Northwestern football program. All right, folks, let's get spicy. Here's maybe my first hot take, and I've got Luke Fickell. Yes, the guy that I had number 6 in last year's head coach power rankings, is the biggest faller of them all. He's down 8 spots to the number 14 spot in these Big Ten head coach power rankings. Luke Fickell came in. He stole the soul of Wisconsin football, and he has not returned the favor. All right? This is a program that is not in a better spot. I know that it was trending down when Paul Chryst was fired, certainly. But 2 years in, there's not a ton of optimism. There's not a lot of positive direction, certainly at Wisconsin. I think one thing, and I'm going to talk about this when I talk about other coaches, one thing that a head coach that's underrated, and I tend to evaluate a head coach on, is coordinator hires and assistant coaching hires. Major, one more time, major miss with Phil Longo. When I talk about stripping the soul of Wisconsin football, really the offensive identity, this team has had no identity the last 2 years with Phil, because what do we know with Wisconsin? Run the football, 2 tight ends, great offensive line. Like that's Wisconsin football in a nutshell. And then they try to open up the offense a little bit, and it certainly hasn't worked. I talk about the hamster wheel. They just keep going around and round. They're not getting really any traction as a program, and the schedule this year is not doing them any favors. Luke Fickell tried to come into Wisconsin, change things a lot, and it just hasn't worked. Wisconsin established a formula of what works and what is successful. They're trying to get back to that with Jeff Grimes coming in as the offensive coordinator. I think he's going to be a little bit more physical. I think he's going to run the football a lot more. But where this program, Wisconsin should not be sitting where they're at right now. I thought Luke Fickell was a good hire when he came to Madison. You kind of look at his track record. His track record is succeeding in a Group of 5 conference, which would, with a team that would eventually become a Power 5 team in Cincinnati. He hasn't done it at the Power Conference level. We'll see if he can do it here in the coming years at Wisconsin. Maybe I'm a little bit more tough on him because Wisconsin being a team that I like. Jonathan Smith at number 13. He's actually down 3 spots from last year. And I don't love bringing him down 3 spots, certainly, because what do we know about Jonathan Smith? Jonathan Smith is a builder. They had a 1-win improvement from the last year. But when I look at Michigan State, they had a rough finish to the season. When you have kind of a younger team and a newer team, I think you want to finish strong, right? Hey, maybe the first couple of games are a little bit rough, but hey, you really want to finish the season on a good note. I thought this team had what it took to win a bowl game, and they failed at doing that. Like, they barely beat Purdue by 7 points, their second to last game of the season, and they just got utterly crushed by Rutgers at the end of the season as well. And I think there's guys that I think I'm a little bit more confident in above them right now. But once again, you talk to me 3 or 4 years down the line, Jonathan Smith could be maybe as high as like 7 or 6 on this list. We know it is a slow developmental build with a Jonathan Smith football program. All right, let's go and talk about coaches number 7 through number 12. Now, I've got Jedd Fisch at number 12 ahead of Jonathan Smith, and I'm going to explain why here in just a minute. But with Jedd, I had him number 12 in the 2024 Big Ten head coach power rankings. He didn't change because he did exactly what I expected him and the Washington Huskies to do last year. They were a handful of teams that I was exactly right about the regular season prediction. I predicted them to go 6-6, and they ended up going 6-6, certainly last year. Jedd Fisch, Jonathan Smith, both first-year head coaches, both coming over from the Pac-12 at programs that needed a little bit of rebuilding. Jedd got to the bowl game. Jonathan Smith didn't. When I take a look at the near future, I think I like Washington a little bit better. Like, I love what they have at quarterback in DeMond. Hey, another young quarterback at Michigan State, and Aiden Childs certainly as well. But I think considering that Jedd got a little bit further in year one, and I kind of like the trajectory a little bit more of the Huskies over the Spartans, that's why I've got Jedd Fisch sitting there at number 12 right now. Let's talk about Sharon Moore at number 11. I thought Sharon Moore learned a lot in year number 1 as head coach. He was number 13 in my 2024 Big Ten head coach power rankings. But when he started the season, it was a little bit rough. They were changing quarterbacks every other week. They were trying to really figure it out on the fly. Once we got to late October, once we got to November, Sharon Moore was like, all right, we're Iowa. That's what we are. We have bad quarterback play. We have good future NFL players on the defensive side of the ball. We can run the football. We need to accept who we are. Hopefully next year we're different. And I think in 2025, they certainly will be a little bit of a different football team. But we need to accept who we are, and we need to play into that. And that's how we need to really form our game plans. And it got a lot better, I think, once Michigan really adapted to who they were and really the window that they needed to be able to look through, so to speak. They finished the season better than anybody. Ohio State win, the Alabama win, the flip of Bryce Underwood, the number 6 recruiting class in the country. This is a team that's carrying all kinds of momentum in 2025. It takes a lot of maturity. It takes a lot of growth as a head coach to be able to work through what Sharon Moore and Michigan worked through last season. And I think this season they're poised to maybe have a 9 or a 10-win season in Ann Arbor. Let's talk about Greg Schiano sitting there at number 10. Now, he's down 1 spot. He was at number 9 in last year's power rankings, sitting there at number 10 right now. Now, there were some other guys below him that certainly deserve to jump all the way up. So maybe that's a big reason why he's jumping back 1 spot. But I know there were some injuries last year on defense for Rutgers, but I thought the defense really underperformed last year considering the amount of experience that was coming back, certainly. But this is just a guy that knows how to succeed at a place like Rutgers. It's going to be really tough to evaluate somebody like Greg Schiano. Like, what would happen if he were the head coach at Penn State? What would happen if he were the head coach at Ohio State? I'm not sure how successful he would do with more talent, but I think he's just in a really good position to get a lot out of a little. Like, he's one of those coaches in the Big Ten that is going to get everything and develop every little ounce of potential that there is out of each and every one of those players. I think he's a really good coach and obviously a great fit for Piscataway, New Jersey. And they're bringing in a really good transfer class coming up this season as well. Let's move on to number 9, Matt Rule. He's down 2 spots from last year's Big Ten power rankings. Now, I get it. You had a young quarterback. You had a true freshman quarterback. Now, I get it. There's going to be some ups. There's going to be some downs that go with that. But I still thought Nebraska underperformed last year. Nebraska was inconsistent. Like I think there's 2 highs and 2 lows from the Huskers last season. That Colorado win was certainly a high in what they were able to do, getting that monkey off their back and how dominant that they were in that game. And then you look at how they performed in that game against Ohio State. Like, those were 2 good coaching performances for Matt Rule. And then you look at what happened in that loss to UCLA. Yes, I know Dylan Raiola got hurt towards the end of that game, but it should have never been in that situation to begin with. Okay? He did not have his team ready to go for that matchup against Deshaun Foster and the Bruins on that particular afternoon. And then just getting absolutely throttled, having a 50-burger thrown up on the board against the Indiana Hoosiers. Look, I know Indiana was a fantastic Big Ten offense, but Matt Rule just did not have his team ready to play. Plain and simple in that game against Indiana. So I think there was a little bit of inconsistency. Rule sitting there at the number 9 spot. We talk about guys that are developers of talent. Does anybody make more with less than PJ Fleck? All he does is get the bowl games. All he does is win bowl games. You look at how this team has developed the secondary over time. They look like they're very much on that way with Coy Parrish and Kerry Brown back there at safety. And Minnesota, I think, is really in position to do a lot right now going forward in 2025. PJ he was at number 8 in my 2024 rankings. He's sitting there at number 8 in 2025. There could be a case to maybe move him up a spot in these rankings, but I feel really good with him sitting there at number 8. He's like, you put him, I think, at a higher level program, I think he would be a little bit more on the map than he certainly is, right? Like Minnesota, not a easy place to win. And he's been consistently like 7-win seasons, like 8-win seasons. When you have people within the Minnesota media kind of saying, well, they won 7 games and they feel like they left some food on the table, that's when you know things are certainly looking up with PJ at the helm of the Golden Gophers. Number 7, I got a lot to say about this one. Number 7 is Lincoln Riley. For some reason, I put him at number 2 in the 2024 head coach power rankings, but he just continues to take steps down. 7-5 regular season, and now a 6-6 regular season within his first year coaching in the Big Ten Conference. Last year just screamed and slapped subpar coaching in the face for me when it came to Lincoln Riley. Like, I look at multiple games. It wasn't just one game, multiple games. There was times when the run game was clearly working. Woody Marks was a 1,000-yard back, their first 1,000-yard back, I believe, since Ronald Jones. So the run game was clearly working. There'd be point times during the game where he would just abandon the run game. He would try to get Miller Moss to go back there and certainly make some plays down the field, and that's where USC kind of started to fall off and started to get behind in some of these football games as well. You've got close games, an overtime game against Penn State. You've also got a 1-point loss to Maryland. Like, you've got a 1-point loss here. You got a 2-point loss here. You got a 3-point loss here, but it's not only against good teams. It's against good teams, but it's also against bad teams, which tells you what? Which tells you that they're playing basically the same level of football against different levels of competition and different levels of teams, which means that this team, they're not adapting. They're not changing. I know that they changed quarterbacks towards the end of the season, but this is a team that, and a head coach in Lincoln Riley, that really wasn't able to adapt that well to some of the things that were happening throughout the season. I've got him at number 7. I think there's a possibility for a case to be made that he could maybe be even lower, but hey, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt of his past with developing quarterbacks and the success that he had over there, but at Oklahoma, but that's becoming more and more of a distant memory as time goes by. This season, big year for Lincoln Riley going forward. Let's head to my top 6. At number 6, I've got Curt Cignetti. We knew about his past. Every place that he had been to as a head coach, He made it much better than he found it. And I think that's going to be the case when all is said and done, when the finished story is shut, when we talk about Curt Cignetti's time in Indiana. It already might be that way after an 11-1 season and a berth in the college football playoff. I think this past year, what happened at Indiana was really clarification of his previous head coaching stops, because I think the reason why I had him ranked so low going into last year, I saw the potential. I saw what he was able to do, but he just hadn't done it at this level. Now that he's done it at this level, it really certainly makes me think more of Cignetti overall when you really factor in his entire resume as a head coach at this level. I love what he does with roster building, the whole production over potential. This is a team, it's hard to recruit. Hard to recruit to Indiana, I think, at the level that they want to be at, especially after 11-1 season. So the transfer portal is going to be a big tool for Indiana football going forward. I love their roster for 2025. I think the roster in 2025 could be almost as good as it was in 2024. And I think that's a lot of credit to the philosophy and the direction that Curt Cignetti has this program going. Now, a couple of times already in these rankings, we've talked about head coaches that do a lot with a little. Is there anybody that does that better than Bret Bielema? This man was put on this earth to do one thing and one thing only: coach Big Ten football. I had him ranked in the double digits. I had him ranked low last season because of that down year in, what would that be, 2023. I thought in 2022 they probably should have won the Big Ten West, left some food on the table. But, man, what Bert did this past season I thought was very impressive, getting this team back on track. And then when you look at what 2025 looks like, people are talking about Illinois as a college football playoff dark horse. They're talking about maybe back-to-back 10-win seasons at Illinois. People already forget just the program Illinois was before Bret Bielema came to Champaign. We're talking about Tim Beckman. We're talking about Lovie Smith. We're talking about 3-win seasons. We're talking about 4-win seasons. We're talking about a 5-win season being a step in the right direction. Bielema has come in here and in less than 5 years has turned Illinois into a really good football program within the Big Ten. This guy deserves to be in the top 5. I think considering his past with 3 Big Ten championships over at Wisconsin, I think he's one of the more underrated head coaches in college football. When we talk about great head coaches, you need to talk about Bret Bielema. It should be no surprise to anybody that these things are happening at Illinois. Number 3 and number 4 were constants from my 2024 Big Ten head coach power rankings, like the just consistent success of Kirk Ferentz year after year, decade upon decade, at Iowa. I think he deserves some credit. I know he was maybe pushed into it a little bit with the AD to get rid of Brian Ferentz and have to hire a new offensive coordinator, but he had to hire a new offensive coordinator. I thought he picked a good one. I thought Tim Lester was a really good selection as OC. You could certainly see the offense start to take strides up last year. I think they're going to continue to take strides up, as an offense this season in 2025. As long as Phil Parker is the DC, they're going to be fine. They play consistent level of football, like 8 wins. When you're this past year, when you're looking at 8 wins, it's kind of like type of season at Iowa. You know you're certainly in a good spot. I thought about maybe putting Bielema ahead of KF. I think those two are closer than some people think, but I've got Ferentz in that number 4 slot. James Franklin. All right, there's going to be some people out here that say, well, he can't win this game and he can't win that game. And that's true. He has had difficulty winning significant football games, but all he does is win 10 games. There's a lot of other people out there that cannot consistently win 10 football games and play at the level that James Franklin continues to produce at Penn State. Like, the narrative surrounding Franklin is that he wins all of the games he's supposed to, but he can't win those elite level against those elite level teams and those elite level football games. I think there's something to be said, and I think it should certainly take into account that this team does not falter when they play a lesser opponent. I've talked about some coaches already on this list that maybe sometimes play down to their competition. James Franklin is always prepared in those football games. He is never taken by surprise, and I think James deserves a lot of credit for that. Do they recruit at the absolute highest level? Maybe not. There's still a top 10 recruiting program, like a top 15 recruiting program, but they develop really good players into the NFL. James Franklin he's right on the precipice. He's right on the precipice of being a great coach in college football. Like, he beats Ohio State this year. They win the Big Ten. Maybe they make a run for a national championship. And we're talking about James Franklin, I think, in a very completely different light. Don't glance over the fact that all this guy does is wins the football games. At number 2, I've got the Danimal, Dan Lanning, right now. All he did his first year in the Big Ten Conference is trot in, win a lot of games convincingly, and win the Big Ten Conference as a whole. When people think of Dan, they're probably going to put that Rose Bowl and they're going to put that on a pedestal and say, well, look at this. And I get that and I understand that, and I'm sure he's going to use that as a little bit of motivation going forward. But the thing with Dan is he just gets better year after year after year. He started out, he could not beat his rivals. 3 consecutive losses to Washington. Of course, you had that loss to Oregon State in 2022, but he's certainly taken care of that over the last couple of years. And following a 13-1 season where they won the Big Ten, imagine where he can continue to climb on this ladder right now. You had Oregon where they were under Mario Cristobal, no doubt about it. Dan Lanning is taking it to another level in Eugene. He recruits almost better than anybody. We've got back-to-back top 5 classes in Eugene, Oregon, certainly right now. There's a lot of resources at Oregon, no doubt about it, but he takes advantage of every single one of those resources. He is still under the age of 40. He is still learning things. I think, considering where he's at in his career, he's certainly on a good track to be one of the best head coaches in college football for a long period of time. And you got to talk about Ryan Day. You got to talk about Ryan Day as the number 1. Just won the national championship. He was number 1 on my Big Ten power rankings last year. When we talked about resources with Dan, we got to talk about resources with Ryan Day right now. They recruit on an elite level, especially at the wide receiver position. They develop at an elite level. They've got really good coaches across the board. Even when you lose Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles as your coordinators, you have a guy on staff in Brian Hartline that they've been able to kind of keep around, and now he's the offensive coordinator. You go out and get a guy like Matt Patricia that it sounds like a lot of guys around that building really like right now. Ryan Day, I think, with the national championship. You can say what you want about those games against Michigan, and I totally get that, and I'll totally hear that, but I don't think there's really any other choice for the number 1 head coach in the Big Ten Conference right now. Final rankings, here's what it looks like, 1 through 18. When you got a guy like Fickle at 14, Jonathan Smith at 13, even like a Greg Schiano at number 10, you know that you have a very healthy and strong list of coaches in your conference. Let's head to Columbus, Ohio, and talk about the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. One of the big things in spring practice, when spring practice began for the Scarlet and Gray to keep an eye on, was going to be the quarterback battle. Okay, there were really 3 guys to start. It's separated now with 2. Tavian St. Clair, the great true freshman, still certainly has a ways to go. You can certainly understand that as a true freshman. But I think when we looked at then Julian Saint, the former 5-star, spent this past season at Ohio State kind of learning the ropes a little bit, and learning what it takes to maybe be a quarterback at a higher level like Will Howard was able to perform at last year. I think a lot of us kind of looked around at the room. We saw Aaron Nolan transfer out, and we're like, yeah, this seems like Julian Saint is going to be the guy. And Julian Saint could certainly still be the guy when the Buckeyes lace it up to kick off the season against the Texas Longhorns. But recent scrimmages and recent happenings in spring practice have maybe had this competition a little bit tighter than anticipated. Ohio State has a student appreciation scrimmage, and there's a lot of media members. Certainly don't take my word for it. Take their word for it. There's a lot of media people that were saying Lincoln Kienholz outperformed Julian Sayin at the student appreciation scrimmage. And there's people within the Ohio State media, very respectable media, that's saying if they're picking a quarterback right now, they're picking Lincoln Kienholz. Boy, if you would have kind of told me a couple of years ago, following that Cotton Bowl performance from Lincoln Kienholz, it says, yeah, a couple of years from now, he might be the leader in the clubhouse to be the starting quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes, I'd be like, no, that's not going to happen. Look at all the talent within this room, and Lincoln Kienholz was maybe not exactly one of the top guys at that point with that loaded quarterback room. But I think over time, it sounds like he has been able to develop. It sounds like he has been able to mature. And it sounds like that is really helping out his case right now to be the starting quarterback. Like, he went 6 of 17 for 86 yards in that Cotton Bowl after Devin Brown got injured. I understand he was thrown in to a really tough spot and a really tough situation. But like I said, when you look at all of the other talent that was in this quarterback room, Lincoln Kienholz is not exactly the guy that I would think would be maybe sitting towards the top when all is said and done. But that's a lot of credit. A lot of credit to Lincoln for staying with it, staying with the process. A lot of times in college football, you see guys in his situation transfer out. Coaches are saying right now that this is a neck and neck battle. What does it say about the Buckeye offense? Like, there's a couple different schools of thought, and right now we don't really know where it is right now. Is this Lincoln Kienholz really stepping up to the plate and playing at that like 5-star level that Julian Sayin is at? Or is this Julian Sayin maybe not coming along as quickly, not really showing that potential maybe as early as the Ohio State coaching staff thought? It's maybe somewhere in the middle. It's maybe a combination of both right now. But the experience, I think, is going to play a big factor for Lincoln Kienholz. That's something that he certainly holds in his back pocket right now. One thing, I don't know if anybody else has brought this up, but one thing that really popped into my mind when I'm hearing this neck and neck battle between two new quarterbacks is it reminded me of the Kyle McCord and Devin Brown type of battle. Remember, that was kind of going back and forth and back and forth. It really turned out that nobody really separated. I thought Kyle McCord got a little bit of a raw deal a little bit. We saw what happened when he transferred out and the type of season that he had at Syracuse. They were the top passing offense in college football. Like I said, I think the guys in this room are probably better than the guys that were in that room a couple of years ago. And I think maybe the ceiling of the offense can certainly be higher this upcoming year than it was back then, but we're talking about two pretty damn high ceilings when you talk about offenses and passing offenses specifically over at Ohio State right now. If this thing goes through spring and we don't have a guy and we go into fall camp, what does that say? I think it says something that's not too complicated. I think you've got two really good quarterbacks that are battling it out to throw to the best weapons in all of college football. I think the more I kind of talk about it and the more I lean into it, the more I'm like, hey, I think this is more about Lincoln Kienholz stepping up and playing at a higher level of football, which I think the competition is going to bring the best out of both of these guys. When all is said and done, I still think Julian Sayin is going to be the guy and probably gives Ohio State a little bit of a higher ceiling throwing the football next season. But whoever it is, these guys battling at this high a level, I think is only going to help Ohio State's offense in the future. What does Ohio State need out of their quarterback? Okay, they need a confident distributor of the football. You have the best weapons in all of college football. Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Inniss, Carnell Tate, a great pass-catching tight end that they brought in Max Clare. Whoever the quarterback is, you cannot have this offense, and I don't think it'll be this way. Based on what we're hearing out of Columbus right now, I think that this is a good battle, and that's why I don't think that this is like the Kyle McCord versus Devin Brown. That's why I think that this is on a higher level of a battle, certainly right now. But you need a guy that can consistently just execute, because you've got the best weapons. And I feel like I could come into this offense and throw for 2,000 yards and at least 15 touchdowns, right? When you have an offense with Brian Hartline that is what this is and has the weapons that they have, you need a guy that can just flat out execute the playbook and that people trust at the controls of this offense. You don't need to make it overly complicated. It's going to be really fun, I think, to really monitor what becomes of this Ohio State quarterback battle. There is absolutely no doubt that, at least ever since I've been following USC here on BTT, that this is probably the most confident that the USC football program has been. They are operating at a very high recruiting level ever since bringing in Chad Bowden as their general manager, certainly right now. And there's a lot of good vibes coming out of LA. They're saying that's the place to be, and if recruiting is any indication, that certainly has ring true, at least so far. But I think the big question that surrounds the USC Trojans right now is, okay, you're having a lot of recruiting success right now, and that's certainly taking the program in a positive direction. But I think the expectation for Trojan fans is to operate at a college football playoff level, is to operate as to being one of the very best teams in the Big Ten Conference. John Canzano from 750 The Game out of the Portland, Oregon area recently had something very interesting to say on his show, and that is the basis of this segment. We'll start with this. Check it out.
Can Riley close the gap on Oregon? I'm really asking, do you think USC, in this landscape, with their recruiting territory, they've got Southern California, do you think USC can be USC again? And I'm not even sure like Alabama can have the advantage that Alabama once had. Like I'm convinced they can't, and that's why Nick Saban decided this was a good time to go. Let's see what happens here with a bigger sample size in the second year. But I'm looking at USC, and all USC had to do before in the Pac-12 was it had to get by Oregon, it had to get by Washington, it had to deal with Utah. In the Big Ten Conference, USC has got to deal with Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State and Oregon and Washington if they get their feet back underneath them. And I just think it's a bigger lift and it's a tougher lift.
So John brings up some very interesting points, whether you like John, whether you don't like John. I think some very interesting talking points certainly came out of that soundbite that he recently had on his show. It's going to be much more difficult for USC to be USC like they were previously and really operate at that top level of college football. It's going to be more difficult to do it in this era. It's going to be more difficult where players can transfer out. It's going to be more difficult to do it against the Ohio States, against the Penn States, against the Michigans, against the Oregons of the world than against the Pac-10 teams of the world, certainly from a previous era. Like, the first thought that I really had after listening to this soundbite was really just what I kind of laid out there. It's going to be very difficult for you where USC is now and where those other four programs are right now for USC to consistently break through into that group. And I kind of posted as much on Twitter. My good buddy Doug from the QB1 show, a great Oregon podcast, go check it out if you're a Duck fan, responded and said, I thought something that was very smart. No surprise if you know Doug. That was something very smart, and I thought that really made a lot of sense. That you maybe take the top four, and if you look at one other team that can make a consistent top five, it's USC. USC has all of the resources, being in a major market like Los Angeles, building the facilities that they are building, right now. Now you got an elite general manager, and they got their NIL certainly all figured out, or it appears that they have it certainly more figured out than they did in the past. All of the building blocks are there for USC to be a perennial college football playoff contender, to perennially be a contender within the Big Ten Conference. You look at anybody else in the Big Ten, look at a Big Ten map. I don't think there's another program within the Big Ten Conference that has the resources to consistently. We know that teams are going to jump up there every now and then. Look what Indiana was able to do. Like, Indiana was in there, Michigan was not. There's going to be teams that certainly jump up into that conversation. But to consistently be able to accomplish that, I think USC is the only other program that can make the top 4, certainly a top 5 right now. But let's try to answer the question. Can USC be USC? The first thing that we need to make very clear, dynasties like Pete Carroll at SC, like Nick Saban at Alabama, like some of these dynasties that we've seen over time in college football are going to be really, really tough to accomplish going forward. Because before you could stockpile players, I call it over-recruiting. Now you can't do that anymore. You've got NIL. You're going to have rev sharing. You have the transfer portal. There's a lot more player movement, player retainment, and building that crazy talented depth that we saw at USC, that we saw at Alabama, that we saw at some of these other programs is going to be insanely difficult. When we talk about USC being USC, I don't know if anybody's going to be like going to 3 straight national championship games. I think there's going to be a lot of more parity, I think, in college football, certainly right now. You're going to build a team up, and that's going to be a really good national championship level team. The team next year, that's going to be much more difficult to really stay at that type of level. Like, you've seen even what happened with Georgia as we've progressed into this era as well. These SEC teams aren't able to over-recruit and hang on, and the same goes for some Big Ten teams as well. So I think that's the first thing that we need to establish right out of the gate. I talked about when USC was USC, and I have a tweet here within this graphic on YouTube from On3's JD Piquel that said, the last time USC locked up California, this is what was happening. And it's Pete Carroll raising the old glass trophy and USC dominating the sport. And that's the direction that USC is going right now. Okay? So that was the building block to USC's success back then. And that's what USC is getting back to doing, is making Southern California a USC territory again. We know the type of talent that comes out of that area. But I think that's only one piece to the puzzle. Okay? That's only one piece. There's a lot of pieces that you got to put in. Development is another thing. When Pete Carroll was the head coach, they brought in the best of the best, and they developed the best of the best. And they created first-round NFL draft picks and second-round NFL draft picks. And Troy Polamalu and Ray Malaluga and Sean Cody and Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart, and all of these guys were very, very high-level draft picks in the National Football League. The talent was there, and the development was there. When you have a guy with Lincoln Riley, with this particular staff, in this particular area, where is the development? I think those are questions that are still being answered right now. We've seen what Lincoln Riley can do in terms of development from the quarterback position. What about the rest of this team? What about the rest of this offense? You look to the development side, on the defensive side of the football, last year was a really good start. All right, to the development piece. I think there's still certainly some things to figure out. Like, here's the thing. When I look at USC, and this is crazy to say about a Lincoln Riley team, but I'm going to say it anyway. I say crazy stuff sometimes. But I'm more excited about the defensive side of the ball than I am about the offensive side of the ball. That is a compliment to the staff that they have assembled on the defensive side of the football with Danton Lynn, Rob Ryan coming in as the linebackers coach, Henderson on the defensive line, Belk back there in the secondary. Like, they've assembled a really, really good defensive staff. So although they're bringing in really good talent from Southern California, now they need to be able to develop that talent and really move this program forward. This is a program that has taken a couple of steps down over time these last couple of seasons. So although they're bringing in great Southern California recruiting, they need to be able to take that to the next level to develop it. And in today's day and age of college football, you need to be able to retain it. You need to make commitment signees. You need to make signees, NFL draft picks. Will USC be able to accomplish that? Those are puzzle pieces that need to be put together. How does USC get back to being USC? Like, where is the journey? It's going to be a more difficult journey than what it was before. Like, we know where USC stood in terms of historically being one of the most, if not the most dominant team, certainly out there on the West Coast. Now in this iteration of the Big Ten, and this is like the toughest era of college football, especially if you are in a Power 2 conference. Like, you're playing much more difficult competition, especially if you're an old West Coast team. You're playing much more difficult competition week in and week out. So it's much more difficult to get to that 10-win level, to that 11-win level, to that type of level. Like, you look at this thing for USC, like, if they're going to get back to that type of level, they're going to need to win a big game. They're going to need to beat a really good football team. Like, on next year's schedule, if they really want to create that bridge to 2026, 2027 being a playoff team and really get USC back to being USC, you need to beat somebody like a Notre Dame. I know Michigan was down last year, but beating Michigan would really help, especially if they end up being a pretty damn good football team. Maybe going into Autzen and beating somebody like Oregon. If you want to get USC back to being USC soon and really take advantage of these recruiting classes, you need to win big games. It comes down to the on-the-field performance. I love what Chad Bowden is doing from the general manager seat right now. But in the end, USC getting back to USC, it's more than just recruiting. It's winning on the football field. How much do you trust that Lincoln Riley is going to get one of those big wins? Right now, my trust isn't that high. Like, when I look at USC and all the great things that are happening right now, and there are fantastic things happening in Los Angeles, California, Lincoln Riley isn't talked about. You're talking about all these recruits, the Jonas Williams coming up, the Tomahini Tapoy, both those guys flipping over from Oregon to USC. You talk about the new GM. You talk about the defensive coaching staff. You don't mention Lincoln Riley because USC is creating all this positivity. USC is creating all this momentum, maybe despite Lincoln Riley right now. If USC wants to consistently get to the top of the mountain, we need to see that Lincoln Riley can be a top coach in college football. That is a big determining factor now more than ever. It's going to be very interesting to see how things play out for the Trojans, certainly going forward. Big Nation, another one in the books. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.